Hello, welcome to our next session. I'm Tamás Erdődi and this is the Modern Artist Club. How it would be the easiest to paint this beauty is really about trying to capture the main shapes first, and later we can fill in the details easily. So it shouldn't be too complex. The first step is usually to mark our boundaries on the page. I have this A4 size watercolor paper. You can't really paint on a photocopy paper because the paper will buckle, and yeah, that's just not how it works. You need good paper to create these effects and also paint. You can find these watercolor papers in any size and any spiral format like this. I feel that something like this is really helpful, where you can keep your sketches together and over time collect ideas. So I like to use either a sketchbook like this with Canson Multimedia, for example, are really great. What I'm looking for is a minimum of 160 grams per square meter, because under that the paper will most likely be like a photocopy paper. It's not really about the paper, just use watercolor paper. That's my first idea or first tip. We will have a butterfly with the usual 45 degrees. From here I'm sketching a large shape. Well, I'm using now a water-soluble pencil, and I chose this light ochre color because it's not really visible in the final painting. And even if I'm keeping some of the lines visible in the end, it's okay. It's not too harsh like black graphite. So I like to sketch with colored pencils and choose these lighter tones as a first pass. Okay, we usually have yeah, I'm looking at different references and trying to find. I have the back wing and also the front or the closer wing. Maybe a bit more linear shape. And in the end we have the rounding. Okay, and for the closer, we should roughly have the same linear edge and also the rounding. Yeah. You can look at these almost like pebbles. Like we have one for the back wing, we have one for the foreground, and we have this separation between the two. So it's interesting how these wings could look like. In my reference, I see it as more like two different shapes. That's why I'm keeping them separate. Okay, and from here, of course, they connect to the body, and this isn't an anatomy course, but the wings should connect to the back if you imagine the shape. And we have a funny, a little bit triangular head and a huge eye. Yeah, and maybe we can keep it oh, little forward movement. Yep, and we have the legs. right now it's okay to just indicate them. I have a feeling that maybe we will lose a little bit these details, and I like to keep some space for the experimentations. I like to use, for example, this is a Uniball micro pen, and what I like to think about is the weight of the strokes. We can decide, maybe you don't want to have an outline, but I feel that with watercolors it's amazing to uh, have this outline. It really helps to have like a punchy contrast to the whole image. And as you can see, that's why I wanted to use the light colored pencils, because I can easily, choose the other line, and it's not going to be visible in the end. And the first line. Okay, and for the line weight, how I like to think about these strokes is it's better to have a bit more rough outline than keeping it a bit too like strong but unconfident. So if you feel like you are unsure like where this line should go, you can keep it as light as possible, or maybe skip that line, and maybe you will find yourself choosing something in the end to focus on. So it's okay to, maybe I'm unsure if this inner division should be visible. I can let it be empty, so it's okay. But maybe I can indicate some of these inner lines. And in nature, we see this visual noise idea many times. Not everything is equally important, and in some areas we have just basically a visual noise and not really. If you look closely to one area, you will see the details there, but if the other area is a bit more loose and maybe just like a visual noise, or maybe if you are looking at one area and then you see something on the side, just on the periphery, you will hardly notice the details there. So I like to add details where I want the eye to focus, and in some areas I can let it a bit bolder, looser. Okay, so just to finish the outline, okay, this is, for example, example for this unconfident line idea, that I like to not force myself to, for example, if I have a form, I don't want to like try to make it in one stroke. You can freely play with these strokes. If you feel like you like to go outside of the stroke, you can play with these. So it's a much more free and much more fun approach to just let your creativity get wild, and like play with these strokes, and like what happens if I'm not following the outline so exactly, and maybe I can have somewhere a double line, or what if like nobody cares. That's the beauty of art creation, that you can freely create and play. And I have a feeling that if we let this fearful art creation, that it should be perfect, it should be exactly how the reference image looks like, we might lose the spontaneity, or we can get a bit rigid, and we like to avoid that. So feel free to play. It should be fun. And if the stroke is getting a bit outside of the boundaries, it's okay, so don't worry. Or yeah, maybe in some areas I can definitely, the eye should be defined, and maybe we can include a bit of the white space. That's a really important part of the eyes, is to keep that little bug. Okay, and don't really stress about the legs. Yeah, maybe we should have 6 of these, so yep. Okay. And now the fun part is the coloring. Okay, I have my little simple watercolor palette this time. How I like to start the coloring process is basically looking at the image and trying to, in my head, I'm trying to convert the image into a black and white version and decide where is the highlight and where we have the darker shadows inside the subject, inside the hero of the scene. And in my case, I know that I definitely like to keep the back wing lighter, the foreground wing should be a bit darker, and of course we should have a light from top to the bottom. So I am starting to color the lower side first. And the wing. Maybe we can add a little bit of red and also the brown to the mix. If you are unsure about which color is which, you can have a little test paper on the side, and you can clearly check before placing this mark. Oh yeah, this is a really rich color, and this way we can start this process with the wet on wet technique, or in this case I'm starting wet on dry, and basically use a bit more water and checking the color just to make sure that I'm not touching the purple. I feel that maybe I have a little bit of that, but it's okay. Okay, and let's create this nice colors by mixing the paint on the paper. And how I like to think about watercolors is sometimes leaving a little bit of gap on the edge could help to add a little bit of life to the image, and not trying to strictly follow an outline might be helpful. In this case, I'm using the brown color just to add depth to this foreground wing. A little bit of background. Okay, but be careful with this step, because if you like this stage, I would keep it at this point, but of course we can always combine it and add more details. I really enjoy when we have a background for any kind of scene, and maybe we can decide if we like to keep the subject on its own, or we like to place him in a background. I like to show you the pure wet on wet technique because it's amazing for these background, filling the background. I'm using now clean water and trying to paint over the edges. What I'm trying to make sure is I'm not touching the yellow or the wing, for example, because if I'm touching that, the paints will mix together, and we like to avoid that. That's the number one rule, to avoid mixing the foreground with the background. Okay, add bunch of paint or bunch of clean water, and when we have enough, we can start to add the first the blue color, and also we will mix it with the green. Okay, and this is where your artistic touch can really shine. How you place this mark is really up to you. Maybe I can show you an interesting technique, which is the splatter splashes. And for that, I like to cover just slightly the foreground subject, and I'm using a special technique, which is post-it. You can use, yeah, maybe a masking tape or even masking fluid, but I like to work quickly, and I don't have patience for really putting too much energy into the masking, so I just like to roughly create a covering for the main subject, just to avoid the blending, because that could create unwanted colors. Yeah, maybe I went over that. Ooh. If you feel that you made a mistake, you can either keep it, because it's okay, it's really okay, or if it really frustrates you, you can, with clean water, quickly remove that. Okay, maybe add some lighter background color here also, and I like to add just a tiny bit of green to this mix. Remember, always feel free to test your colors, because you might accidentally touch the wrong paint, and yeah, that's something we like to avoid. I like to keep this randomness in the background, so I like to, you know, uh, play with maybe the marks and also the edges, or maybe if you have an area where you are unsure how you wanna place the brush marks, I like to think about these areas like maybe a dancing parquet, where I'm letting the brush freely create random fill in digital illustration. We have like dedicated tools to create randomness and manipulating the brush in a way that the digital brushes in a way that feels like traditional tools. And that's why I love traditional painting, because here we can create these effects on the paper, on the canvas, and we don't need to, I don't know, combine complex tools and dial in settings. We just need to play with our hand and the brush and how we make these marks. So maybe I'm thinking about if I like to keep an area a bit cleaner, maybe I will keep it. Traditionally, we use the brush like the tip of the brush, and with the dry brush technique we can use the edge, the side, and this way create almost like a broken line. And this way it, like, look at these random marks, like what we can achieve. And like you wouldn't be able to create a textured look if you only use your brush like a writing device, like this way. But with this side, depending on how much water you have on the brush, maybe it's time to remove some water. But if you find the right consistency or a right amount of water, you can create nice effects, almost like a tree bark, or like texture, random textures. But here, for example, we can emulate that feeling when you have, for example, something in the foreground, and just imagine you have some leaves or something is in front of the camera, or you as the viewer, and you have these layers of depth, and most likely these different depth layers will become blurry, and you will only see the main focus subject. So I love focusing the attention to the main subject. And this is a technique what I like to use as the negative painting, where we paint something and later make some little changes. This is the creative problem solving. I feel that if we can learn from what we don't like and what we like to improve, we can create nice paintings. I hope that you will try out some of these techniques and create your own butterfly. Happy painting. Ciao.